Hey, it's Mark Linear with your video thought for the day. So this week, I'm looking somehow over 5 days at 6 different ways our pastor taught us in church a week or so ago to read scripture. In other words, when you're reading the Bible, what should you be reading for? How can we get kind of a game plan in our mind? You know, this is like GPS living. You don't get in a car randomly and start driving. You get a game plan in mind. You plug into the GPS where you're going, and that tells you what to look for on the way. Well, in the same way, in this life, if we know where we're going and we want to live biblically and we want to be biblical people who are rooted in the Bible, it helps to, along the way, look for the things you need to be looking for to make the right turns, to do the right driving. So this first one was yesterday. You can go back and watch it. They were commands to obey. The second thing you can look for as you read the Bible are sins to avoid. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So a good example is in the book of Galatians. This is a letter that Paul wrote to a group of churches, kind of southeastern, south central Turkey. And he wrote it, figure 50 AD, so about 17 years after the death of Christ or so. Now, Paul wrote this letter, and he's got a lot to say. But if we read the letter and look for this second thing, sins to avoid, it'll jump up in the 5th chapter, verses 19 through 21, where Paul just starts listing off these sins of the flesh. He calls them works of the flesh. Flesh in Greek, sarx, just means your flesh and stuff, but Paul uses it in a special way to talk about that lost nature of humanity, that part of us that's just not what we're supposed to be, not what we were made to be. So then Paul says, these are the things to avoid. And he starts out with sexual immorality. Well, I think most people would say, yeah, I got that one. That's a good one. And then he says impurity. And impurity is, you think, well, isn't that sexual immorality? Well, not really, not really. I mean, impurity is also impure thoughts and ideas and an impure lifestyle. And then he goes another step forward and he says sensuality. And now you might be saying, okay, well, hold on. These all sound the same. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality. Aselgia is the Greek word that's translated sensuality. And it's got this idea of just violating social norms. Dressing in ways that just aren't socially acceptable. Doing things that just aren't socially acceptable, violating those social norms. And then Paul says, okay, we got those. Then his brain, you can just see it working through God's inspiration here. He says, idolatry. Well, I hadn't been worshiping idols lately, unless by idolatry I'm including putting anything in the place of God. Now my idols might be anything down to, Paul talks about the Philippians, people whose God is their appetite, because they put their appetite before God. So anything we put before God, these are sins to avoid. Avoid the sin of sorcery. Now, that's an interesting Greek word, by the way, pharmakia. We get pharmacy from it. He's not saying avoid drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, but that's just the way the word evolved. It's the idea of magic. Take this pill and you'll get bigger or littler or whatever Alice in Wonderland said. That's the root of the idea of pharmakia, a pharmacy. Sorcery, though, we're not to be looking for something else or someone else to have the divine influence in our life. That comes only from God. And then he shifts from that and he says enmity. We're to avoid the hatred and animosity towards other. He adds the word strife, striving and contentious against each other. He adds the word jealousy. Ooh, if I only had what so-and-so had. It just burns me up. I'd love to see them fall apart over it. Fits of anger. Whew. That's one for everybody to consider. Then he adds rivalries. He's sitting there saying, rivalries? What are rivalries? I mean, I went to school. We had our rivals. Is that what he means? No, no, no. Arathea is really just off the same word, eris, that he used for strife. If you look up the word in a Greek dictionary, you're going to see that it basically means the same thing as strife. Paul's just coming up with these different words that denote an attitude. This isn't an exact list with all these precisions. And so he talks about dissensions. He talks about divisions. He talks about envy. He talks about drunkenness. He talks about licentiousness, and he talks about sexual promiscuity and orgies. And then he just has a catch-all. He says, and things like this. Paul's describing a life that's lived concentrated on me. What others do for me, what I want, what's most important for me. And that drive is what drives these sins there. And if we read that, we say, sins to avoid. And it's a great way to read the Bible. Now, there are 4 more I've got to fit in over the next 3 days. So tune in again tomorrow for your next one. But today, just pull a Bible out. Read a chapter somewhere and see if you can find a sin to avoid. That's your video thought for the day.